Hello, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. Welcome to Gospel Minded, an outreach of Benedictus Psychological Services. If you haven't checked out that website yet, go have a look at benedictuspsych.com. Here on Gospel Minded, we spend a few minutes each week talking about psychology, our emotions, mental health, those sort of things, and we reflect on how these important topics are related to the Sunday Gospel reading each week. Like always, this isn't meant to replace actually getting yourself to church or going to Mass, participating in counseling, therapy, spiritual direction if you're involved with those sort of practices. But things of the mind and our psychology so often go beautifully hand in hand with our spirituality. If this is your first time coming to Gospel Minded, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome back. Either way, I hope that you'll like this video and that you'll subscribe to the channel so that you never miss an episode of Gospel Minded. So friends, here we are sailing along now. We're in the second week of Lent, and the gospel reading from today is a scene that's pretty familiar to a lot of us. It's the message of the Transfiguration from the Gospel of St. Matthew once again. So I'm going to read some of this because there are a couple things here that I think really stand out that are useful to reflect on. So again, this is from Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 from 9. And this is what it says. It says, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with him. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell prostrate and were very much afraid. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Rise, and do not be afraid. When the disciples raised their eyes, they saw no one else but Jesus alone. So I'm going to stop there. The gospel does go on for a few more sentences, but there is just a ton of stuff there in those lines that we can unpack. Certainly spiritually, of course. I mean, first of all, this imagery of Jesus ascending the mountain, and he takes with him Peter and James and John. You know, I think any time in the scriptures, especially in the New Testament, when we see the Lord ascending the mountain, well, you just know something remarkable is going to happen. And that was certainly the case in this scene from the Transfiguration. I mean, can you imagine if I put myself in the shoes of Peter, James, or John, and I am witnessing this magnificent event unfold? You know, the gospel says they were afraid. I think I'd be plenty afraid too if I were able to observe and behold that kind of mysterious, miraculous event. Psychologically speaking too, I think there's something going on here. There's this idea that was put forth by the theorist Abraham Maslow. He talked about what he referred to as like a peak experience in life, which I thought, how fitting for today's gospel reading, talking about ascending the mountain. So for Maslow, we would have these opportunities sometime in life to have a, as it were, peak experience, which he described as this, a moment of awe, unity, and transcendence. So isn't that interesting, that moment of awe, unity, transcendence, here on this gospel commemorating the Transfiguration. Why is it important? Because, what Maslow was talking about was something that maybe you've experienced in your life. I would like to believe that I have experienced it in my life. But isn't it funny how sometimes there might be something that happens to you, or some chain of events, some connected things that you observe or witness, or that happens to you, that Maslow talks about as being like this peak moment, and it changes so much for you. It starts to change around the way you think about things, the way you think about life, the way you perceive your reality. I mean, I wrote a few other notes here. One of the things that he commented on was that um, it reorganizes your perceptions. So can you imagine Peter, James, and John? At this point in Matthew's gospel, they had observed and been present to a lot of the ministry of Jesus. But holy smokes, seeing something like this, the Lord transfigured before them, and then the voice of the Father coming from the cloud. This is my beloved Son. I don't know where exactly the hearts and minds of those three apostles were at that time, but I would have to believe that after an event like this, it's a peak experience. And no doubt uh, they were going to be impacted and changed because of it after it had happened. So I don't know what a peak experience might look like in your life. It could be the birth of a child. It could be the passing tragically of a family member. It could be uh, changing jobs when you don't expect it and you find that you flourish in a new career. It could be any number of things. But when we have these peak experiences, be on the lookout for it to change and reorganize the way you think about things. So that's important. And that's point number one that I wanted to bring up. But what I really wanted to talk about today is the fact that who joins Jesus in the midst of this scene of the transfiguration? It's figures from the Old Testament. It is Moses and Elijah who appeared with him and are conversing with him. I think that that is so revealing, and I'm certain that so much can be said about this from a theological perspective and spiritually speaking. But psychologically speaking, I want to talk about the fact that uh, the old integrates with the present. The things that happened in the past seem to find a way to make themselves present in whatever the situation is like right now. The transfiguration points that out. So Jesus is here. He's transfigured. The voice of the Father thunders, "This is my beloved Son." And yet those monumental Old Testament figures are there. I think that that's so revealing, because so it is with our life. With whatever kind of state of life you find yourself in right now, today, you are in that state because of things that have happened in the past. And you are influenced in what you are doing or wherever you're at right now by things that you had experienced before, things that you observed and witnessed, perhaps even in childhood, relationships that you had made from adolescence through high school, college years, all of that kind of stuff that forms who we are has an impact and influences where we're at and what we're doing today. Now, here's the thing. The past seems to find a way to make itself present and new so often, sometimes for the good, plenty enough in ways that we would rather less see the past get dug up. And maybe that means falling into old habits or unhealthy behaviors or maladaptive coping mechanisms that say I relied on, in my late teens or 20s. Maybe it means rekindling relationships that at one time weren't so good for me. You know, the thing I just want us to be attentive to and aware of is the fact that we think that we can put the past behind us so easily. And, whether it's something that was really awesome or something that was really bad, whatever, we have new chapters in life and we can turn a corner and all this sort of stuff. And again, with Jesus, he makes all things new. And yet at the same time, we know so well that things that happened to us before find a way to be, as it were, ever new. Now, in the case of the gospel reading today, it's like Jesus has said in the readings we heard not too long ago, I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Jesus is being manifested here not to like rub out and get rid of Moses and Elijah, but here they are alongside of him, conversing with him. Tremendous. So too, what if we could integrate those good things about our past into where we are today? Remember when you were younger and the person that you idealized wanting to be when you were older or grown up, or thinking about the goals that you had set as a young person, those lofty thoughts of things that you wanted to achieve and accomplish. What if that's the stuff that comes up today when we think about where we're at now and trying to integrate that stuff of the past with where we're at now? It might make a big difference, because what I'll tell you I see happen all too often is people who try to completely forget about who they were in the past, situations they found themselves in the past. They try to, as it were, just repress, in some cases, unhelpful or bad or not good memories. And, in a sense, it's reasonable to want to do that. We're kind of geared to avoid that which is unpleasant and difficult and seek out the things that are pleasurable. But I think so much the better will we be if we can find a way to work through those things, even perhaps, like I say, integrating the stuff that got us to where we're at now with where we are in our present. And, together, the past and where we're at now can direct the way we want to go forward in the future. So just something worth thinking about. It stood out to me as I read this gospel text for today that even in this magnificent moment, when Jesus is transfigured in front of the apostles, the past found its way there, and blessed were the three, Peter, James, and John, who got to experience that magnificent moment in time. We can be blessed too when our past is integrated with where we're at now and helps us to drive forward in charity, in virtue, so that we can flourish and live a good life. So, good stuff to think about. Let us keep charging forward with the season of Lent. Between now and next time, I'll be certain to pray for you, and I ask that you pray for me. I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. This is Gospel Minded. Take care.